with us live in Des Moines. How you doing?
Doing fine, thank you.
Well, it's good to see you. The last time we were on Hannity and Combs, so you and I had a little disagreement over the Iraq war issue, and people were acting like, wow, you were unfair to Ron Paul. You didn't think I was unfair to you, did you?
The disagreement was over who was winning the polls. Remember, you denied that the polls weren't accurate. They were your polls, and I won them.
No, they weren't a poll. What it was is people calling in, and anybody can call in those things.
So it's 3 dozen supporters I have.
There's more than 3 dozen. No, I'm not denying you have a lot of supporters out there, but you and I do have a fundamental disagreement. It doesn't mean I don't like you. There are a lot of things we do agree on.
Yeah, you have a couple conservative viewpoints. So, I mean, if you're a strict constitutionalist, you should agree with me on everything.
Before we go any further, if you don't win this primary process and get the Republican nomination, will you run third party?
Plans to do that.
You have no plan. Will you support whoever the winner is?
Not necessarily. Not unless they adopt a foreign policy that I can approve of.
But they all disagree with you on the war in Iraq.
Well, remember George Bush ran on my foreign policy, or we ran on the same foreign policy in the year 2000.
But the world changed. You're talking about not having nation building.
Yeah, but the Constitution hasn't changed.
No, but the world has changed, and you've got to adapt to the different national security challenges one faces, no?
Well, no, not really. I mean,
I think you don't have to adopt after 9/11.
I think the founders' advice about staying out of entangling alliances applies today.
But if the 9/11 Commission report says that they were at war with us for nearly a decade, if you go back to the Khobar Towers, the bombings at the embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, if you look at the USS Cole, and the 9/11 Commission investigates why we were vulnerable the way we were, and they conclude they were at war with us, we weren't at war with them. It's not smart to defend yourself in that war?
But the 9/11 Commission report also said that the reason they were at war with us is because we were over there. We had a base in Saudi Arabia.
So we're to blame for the 9/11 attack?
No, we're to blame. The people who do the attacks have to be blamed, not the American people. But our policy, if our policies are such that we invade a country, yes, that's bad policy, but you didn't invade them. I didn't invade them, but our policymakers invade these countries and bomb these countries. Well, why shouldn't they react in a way that they think is in their own?
You've got to look at the entire history. It was Saddam Hussein who invaded an innocent country, Kuwait. It was Saddam Hussein who wanted to take control of the world's oil supplies, which would put our national security in jeopardy. We did take him out of Kuwait. We did have a ceasefire. We did have 17 resolutions. He didn't abide by them.
But back to the 9/11 report, which you cited, they also said the reason they attacked us was because we were over there. So they made my point, and that's what people fail to realize. But
that sounds very. So we're not to have anything to do with the Middle East.
We should have a lot less to do. We should trade with people.
Well, I agree
and talk
with that.
With people. And besides, where are you going to get the money? We're going broke. You care about our dollar, I'm sure.
I care a lot about it.
The dollar is on its way down precipitously today. And all they want to do to bail out the housing industry is print more money. And we just can't afford it anymore. All empires in. We have 700 bases, 130 countries. We're not going to maintain it. So if you pick out 3 or 4 and say we have to do it, you should say, all right, we got to be in the Middle East, but bring all the troops home from Korea, all from Japan, and all from Europe, because how do we need them in Europe to defend our country when we're going broke?
You raise a lot of good points, and I do think that America is spread too thin, and I think our military is too small, but I also believe the world has been reconfigured in as much as if we ever have a time, a date, a place where these fanatics get a hold of weapons of mass destruction, I believe they will use them. And I believe, in my viewpoint, it's naive for us to just stand back, allow them to build up their military and their fanaticism, and not do anything now while we have an opportunity.
Well, we just disagree on the incentive, and you think they come maybe, at least your side argues they come because we're free and prosperous, and I think they come because we're stealing their oil, or at least that we perceive as stealing their oil, and we're on their land.
We're paying an awful lot of money for that oil we're stealing. We're paying nearly $100 a barrel now.
Yeah, and that's why it's a failed policy.
I agree with you.
We went over there to protect oil, went from 27 to 100, and we spent $1 trillion on this war, which is printed money, and that causes the inflation.
I think America must move towards energy independence now. We have got to end our dependence on foreign oil. And frankly, I don't hear any candidate taking that position to the point where I think they should. In the short term, we ought to be drilling in Anwar, the 48 states.
I'm all right with that.
Off the coast.
I'm all right with that, but I'm also, I don't worry probably much about it as some others, because Japan has no oil, and they don't sit around, arguing about it. They sell us stuff and make money, and then they go and...
we should build nuclear plants.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. We should
build refineries.
And let the oil, and you got to look at prices. The price of oil goes up. Gasoline goes up, we'll drive less. I think there'd be more nuclear power plants. We'd have more electric cars, all kinds of alternatives. But I believe the market can handle that. You don't want Washington to decide, or they'll pump the R&D money into their friends. And and they'll put it into the wrong area. They might not put it into nuclear. They might put it into solar or something that isn't as efficient.
But what Republican candidates, if they did win the nomination, couldn't you support? You said you couldn't support everybody. Who could you support? Who couldn't you support?
Well, I can't right now. I can't support any unless they switch over and talk like an old-time Republican. The traditional conservative Republican balanced budgets and.
Well, I agree. But they all want to cut taxes. They all want to limit spending. I've interviewed all of them. They've all at least said publicly to me they want to do those things. They have differences on foreign affairs, as we just discussed.
Right. So,
isn't that old-fashioned conservatism, Reagan conservatism?
But I think one of their problems is when you look at their records, they don't quite match up to
their promises now.
My NTU rating in Washington. Yeah. So I've actually carried through. When people look at my website, they say I like your program. Then they look at my voting record and say, my goodness, he voted that way too. Well, and that's what solidifies their support for me.
Well, look, I can tell you, I give speeches. I've given a lot of speeches around the country, and wherever I go, there are Ron Paul supporters with their signs in my face challenging me.
And their numbers are growing exponentially.
I've never disliked you. I like you as a person. I think you're very principled in your beliefs. I don't agree with you, especially on foreign policy issues right now. That's all, but that doesn't mean we can't like each other.
In 1952, you would have been an internationalist supporting Eisenhower, and I would have been a Taft Republican.
Well,
but what's wrong with a Taft Republican? He's Mr. Republican. We have a monument for Taft in Washington.
What do you think of George?
Foreign policy.
What do you think of George W. Bush?
As a gentleman and an individual, fine. I've talked to him quite a few times. I just think that his speeches were great in 2000, but he was misled by neoconservative advisors, and he was overtaken.
What do you mean by neoconservative?
Well, the people who came from, the Podoritzes and Crystals, who came from the Democratic Party, and they believed in a militant foreign policy, and they believed in entitlement increases. That's why we ended up
Do you really believe if we don't stay on offense in the war against terrorism, these fanatics that would strap bombs on their own kids, do you really believe we'll be safer?
We'll be safer if Osama bin Laden has recruited more easily than ever before, because we now occupy 2 Muslim countries, and essentially we have the same problem in Pakistan. That's a puppet government. Was that a good investment? $10 billion into Pakistan?
Well, what are we going to...
And we expected him to catch Osama bin Laden for us? That's the kind of nonsense that I'm so tired of.
Well, but the reality is they also have nuclear weapons. It's a very precarious situation. Look, if Musharraf is toppled, think about this. You literally create the possibility of an Iranian-style theocracy with nuclear weapons. How frightening is that for the world to see? Both for India and for the Middle East.
How come India doesn't even seem to be lifting a finger?
India's concerned.
They're not worried about it.
Of course they're worried about it.
Yeah, but they're
not. If Ahmadinejad gets nukes, that doesn't worry you?
Why don't we let them deal with it? The Soviets had 40,000, and we stood them down.
How do you stop? Aren't you concerned that Ahmadinejad gets a nuclear weapon?
Well, he's the person that you've misdirected your attention to, because he doesn't have any power. He might not even win the next year's election. At least he's an elected leader. It's the mullahs that have the power, and they're much more commonsensical than Ahmadinejad.
Well, I will tell you this. I have enjoyed always seeing you, debating you, and I do agree with you on a lot of economic issues. Good luck in the caucus tomorrow.
Good.
Ron Paul,
thank you.
We appreciate your time.
You'll come around.
Good luck. Nice to see you.
Thank you.